Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We're back, episode number 3 of Ummah in Exile. I think today's topic is one of the most important, consequential topics that anybody in the Muslim world could potentially discuss. And alhamdulillah, we are given the chance to discuss it freely because a lot of Muslims don't have that freedom. You'll understand what I mean in a second because it relates to the topic. But in short, what we chose to discuss today, and every theme that we choose essentially will relate to the concept of the Ummah being in exile, right? Spiritual, mental, political, like we discussed before. Today's topic is decolonization. So decolonization, what does it mean? What does it stand for? How many facets and layers are there to colonization that this ummah has experienced? And what is decolonization, right? And how can we achieve decolonization in today's world?
SubhanAllah. We felt like this was a really good topic to discuss, especially given today's very hot political climate. And additionally, given its important historical prevalence, not just in Islamic history, but just history in general. Colonization is very evident, and the chains of colonization still echo to this day.
They do.
And one kind of interesting thing while we were kind of discussing this topic just beforehand, just to kind of preface this to the viewer, was we kind of brought it back to the first episode as well, like the whole introduction of the Ummah in Exile, what it meant to be an Ummah in Exile, right? Like us defining it, essentially. And we both kind of hit on a topic together, which was, again, that might equals right type of thing. And again, how this kind of mindset has, leached itself into society, and additionally it's leached itself into the Muslim mind. And we need to understand the historical precedent that was set even before the time of the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. This was before even the Arab were worshipping idols.
So before you get that, I know where you're going with this. And I think it's a very important point that you have to hit on. But I want to ask a question, right? If I ask you, hey, Abdurrahman, what do you think of when I say colonization? What comes to mind usually?
Yeah, like some physical force taking someone's land.
Right. And I think for the average person, it would probably be what they learn in school, right?
Yeah.
Europeans coming to America and colonizing the Americas, and the British colonial endeavors in all over the world, basically. That's your average perception of colonization. It's not a wrong perception, right? It's just, there's much more to it, and especially when it comes to the Muslim world. So now I want to redirect you back to your point, and I want you to keep going with the original point that you were making.
Okay, yeah. So I understand the connection now, and it was actually important to ask me to kind of like interject that question to also not just myself but also the viewer, which is what is your definition of colonization? Is it this type of kind of like, again, this taught history of simply a very successful British Empire all over the world that had its fingers stretched, or is it something deeper? And what, again, I think that this example that I'm gonna kind of again point to that predates Islam, should showcase the multiple forms of colonization and the reason why, again, in our belief that it was so important to go and hit on this topic, which is, again, the introduction of idolatry into the Arab society. And how that came about, just to kind of summarize it very quickly, is by an individual named Amr ibn Luhay. And this individual had gone north from, Saudi Arabia, what we now
Mecca,
consider Mecca is essentially.
Right.
And in his travels on his caravan, they ended up finding this very successful, essentially, I don't want to call them Assyrian, but they were within that Mesopotamia region, a very successful empire there.
Right.
With extremely large soldiers and very fine, beautiful women. Just all of the ingredients for a successful society that one would
superficially want, at least.
That one would desire, maybe if not for themselves, for their community members, right? This is the spark of an idea. Right. Muhammad says to himself, oh wow, what makes these people so successful that I can now benefit my own people?
Right.
You see, this is the inception of an idea. Exactly.
I remember last time we discussed that sincerity is not enough because Shaitan preys on sincerity.
100%. 100%. Look, this guy probably literally was thinking to himself, hey, how can I benefit, if maybe not my own household, my own community? So you can see how some type of desires to do good may in fact actually bring bad. And what he ended up bringing back was what we know as Hubal, right?
Hubal, yeah.
Which is one of their main gods out of the many gods that they worshipped. But you can understand now how him bringing back one single idol led to catastrophe within the entire region.
Chain reaction of...
domino.
And I think it's very important to highlight that he brought idolatry to the heart of monotheism, to Baytullah, right, to the first house of worship, to Mecca, to the Kaaba.
But not by force.
And not by force, right? Not by force, by sincerity, actually. So he saw this thriving society. He asked them, what is your guys' secret? And they said, Hubal. By the way, for those who are a little more plugged into the conspiracy network, Hubal is the Meccan version of Baal, right?
Really?
Yes.
No, this I didn't know, actually.
So Baal is Baal and Hubal are both mentioned in the Quran, right? And Hubal is the Arab Meccan adaptation of Baal. And it is, we all know Baal, right? Yeah. The deity that is literally basically Shaitan incarnate. And Allah refers to Baal as such, right? As a Satan in the Quran. This is kind of one of the tricks that Shaitan uses to confuse people. He literally enters into idols, right? Idols are demons. And people worship them. People worship these demons. People know what goes on with Baal. And if you don't, we can dedicate a whole episode to Baal and all that, but just take some time, look it up for yourself. Baal, it goes beyond Islam and beyond,
It's pretty deep.
But yeah, I mean, this is a very key point to make, introducing idolatry into the heart of monotheism,
right,
causing a chain reaction of shirk then to spread around, the rest of Arabia, right? But now why do you mention that? What does that have to do with colonization?
I believe the reason why I mention it personally is because, again, it's to highlight that there are different avenues of colonization.
Right.
There's not just one, again, defined form of colonization like we are so heavily taught, like how you brought up. Instead, from my perspective, and I believe yours, there is a myriad of ways to influence a population, to influence a people into thinking that they are weak, that they are dependent, and that essentially that there's nothing that they can do. Again, this learned helplessness that we also talked about.
That's a great example. I think another example, because we tend to think of colonization historically, again, as started with the European ventures of exploration and finding the Americas and the scramble for Africa and whatever else happened in the Muslim world and in India and in China, whatever, right? We tend to think of it as a Western conception. As a matter of fact, colonization has been around for as long as mankind has, probably. Another instance of colonization that's mentioned in the Quran is Fir'aun and Bani Israel, yes. Right? That Fir'aun was this tyrant that ruled over the lands and had colonized these people and enslaved these people. We read that narrative in the Quran and we think of the physical enslavement that the Bani Israel experienced. What we tend to neglect is the psychological enslavement that they had when they left Fir'aun's court. And it comes time and again in the form of idolatry, worshipping the golden calf, even though Musa alayhi salam, through the will of Allah, had just taken them through the Red Sea. They'd witnessed karamat, miracles, yet they still persisted in idolatry. You have to reflect, why is that, right? These are a monotheistic people. When you dig deeper into the history of Judaism in Egypt, not Judaism, whatever you want to call it, you know, and by the way, this is a biblical narrative too, that the kingdoms of Judea and the kingdoms of Jerusalem and the kingdoms of Israel, you know, back in the day, they end up actually becoming idolatrous again at some point. So one thing is, why does that happen? Why do monotheistic people become idolaters? Because of the mental, psychological colonization that happens to them. Time and again, they espouse their inferiority complex with the power of the time, kind of like what Amr ibn Lu'ay did, right? And then he brought it back to
his own people,
Mecca, right? And then you'll find instances throughout human history of colonization unfolding. Colonization is not a recent concept. The prophets, alayhi salatu wasalam, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Musa alayhi salam, Isa alayhi salam, they came to actually decolonize their people in some shape or form.
100%.
Right?
100%.
Whether it be literally or mentally or spiritually. And this is kind of what we want to address today. The historical background is very important. And I think we have to break that monopoly that the mind has, especially the modern Muslim mind, that colonization is a Western thing, right? That the West came and after World War I, they partitioned Muslim lands, and the Ottoman Empire collapsed, and the Sykes-Picot Agreement carved up the Middle East. And this went to Syria, this went to France, and this went to England. The whole Zionist project is a colonial project. It's all true. But that is physical, material colonization, right?
Yes.
Oftentimes, and I think this is even arguably more dangerous than that, and we tend to neglect it, is the Eastern colonization that came upon our Ummah. This was from the Soviets. This was from the communists. This was from the isms that were, by the way, the Soviets and the communists also physically colonized Muslims in Central Asia and in Chechnya and Dagestan. They waged war and killed hundreds of thousands of Muslims, right? So people forget about that when they talk about colonization.
Yeah, exactly.
But the spiritual and mental colonization that they imposed upon us, where they erased Islam out of the social prism, they reconditioned entire generations to redirect their efforts, their social efforts, their resistance efforts, their political efforts towards isms, socialism, communism, this ism, resist imperialism, this. And if you look at Muslim countries' histories from the 20s onward, where is Allah? And I don't mean like, where's Allah's help? Astaghfirullah al-Azim.
Right.
Where is Allah talked about? The original resistance movements were socialist resistance movements, right? And that is why, partially in my opinion, why they failed. Because that the Muslim who has no izzah is the one who's detached from Allah. And if you do not center Allah in your resistance, in your politics, and whatever, you're bound to fail down the line. You may reap some success here and there, but down the line, your overall project is built upon very weak foundations. That is a very dangerous form of colonialism, in my opinion, that we don't talk about enough.
Dig into it.
I mean, look at, for example, the PLFP, People's Liberation Front for Palestine, right? that was a resistance movement, socialist Palestinian resistance movement.
Yeah.
Right? They fought the Israeli occupation. I'm not going to discredit whatever effort happened there. It at least sustained the resistance. But ultimately, it broke apart. Ultimately, you failed. Ultimately, you signed treaties with them, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't until an Islamic resistance started putting up a front that the Israelis and the greater Zionist project actually started having their feet to the fire.
Yes.
You know, now that story still remains to be determined. But I think until the Muslims redirect their concept of freedom, of liberation, from isms and material consequences in this world to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being the one and only who can have authority over everything, then we will not succeed.
You know, dude, subhanAllah, I was actually literally thinking about this on my way over here, which I was having a conversation with somebody like so many years ago, and they asked me, they were like, you know how you always come up with like a good answer like after you've had the discussion?
Yeah, the shower thoughts, right?
Damn. This happened years later. Right, so they posed the question to me. They were like, okay, hey, so why doesn't Islam have like a central figure, like a figurehead who dictates policies and who enacts morals and new rulings for the modern century? And of course, back in the day, I just didn't know how to come up with an answer because, I told them I think that it sounds like a very foolish idea to always hit refresh just because there's a new leader. What's to say that this leader, as we see with the Pope, saying that homosexuality is okay, and then a new leader coming in and saying, no, it's not okay, right? So, and both are supposedly divinely inspired, right? This is not the topic, but the main topic is who. I kind of answered the question on my way here when thinking about this subject, which is we do have a central figure, we do have a central leader. His Allah. That's what really separates Islam from so many other religions, right? If you think about it, Christianity believes in the Trinity for the most part. Maybe not all sects of them, but majority of them.
99%.
Judaism, for the most part, is essentially very monotheistic, but relies very heavily for their, on the rabbis and the tradition.
Yeah, it's more so like a tribal set of rituals and culture than a religion at this point.
So the one thing that's holding Islam and Muslimin together that we need to find as, it's a unifying point, is Allah. Right?
Of course.
And it really goes back to your point of when things are made central with the wisdom and with the backing and the hope and desire that this is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that this will bear fruit, but it won't necessarily be fruit that I eat. Again, we always say this saying when we're together, whereas we wish to build something something that we might not necessarily feel the shade of underneath the sun. Right. But
we wish to plant seeds whose shade we may never experience.
Exactly. Right? But why do we plant them though? We plant them for the future.
Right.
So we need to think of our mindsets the same way. Our mindsets have been colonized. Our physical countries have been colonized. Our governments have been colonized.
Right.
The way that we seek answers have been colonized. Again, we spoke about Zoran and how we're extremely excited. Again, I was very, very, very
it's normal,
when he got elected. But when you take a more objective look, and as Muslims, we need to go and take an objective look at an individual. We need to say to ourselves, we need even better representation.
I agree.
You see, we shouldn't just stop at a Zoran Mamdani.
Right.
We talked about this a little bit in private. We need to find and mold the future generation to become not the next Zoran, but to push them to become the next Abu Bakr, the next Umar, the next role models of Islam, because that is a form of decolonization. Because we're talking about colonization, and we're talking about exile. We need to bring up solutions, right?
Of course.
So at least the solution being primarily focusing heavily on the youth. Now, my one big question to you is, and we live in America, obviously, alhamdulillah. You know, it's great opportunities, great freedoms. You know, here and there, everything gets trampled. You know, everything gets trampled every now and then, but we bounce back. But how do we tackle this mindset that's being essentially hammered into us 5 days a week in school, and then additional 2 days with TV programming and social media and stuff like that?
So this always takes me back to the words of an Algerian sheikh who spoke some really wise words. I think I may have even mentioned it in the last episode. He said, the colonizers may have left our lands, but they have not left our schools. They have not left our offices, our government institutions. They haven't left our TV programming, right? Every single Muslim effort, not every single, but a lot of Muslim effort nowadays is directed not with Allah in the center, unfortunately, in my opinion. I work in politics, I see it firsthand, right? We have, we mention the names of candidates more than we mention the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right?
Yeah.
We make more dhikr upon people than we make dhikr upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We ask Allah's help in the most dire of circumstances. It's not habitual for us to ask His help. It's not habitual for us to turn to Him first before a Zohran or someone else, right?
Only during dire needs.
Only during dire needs. Ya Allah, bombs are dropping on children in Palestine. Where was your ask for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the 80 years that the bombs may not have been dropping, right? Even though that bombs have been dropping for 80 years, unfortunately, on Palestine. Actually, my opinion is the entire Palestinian cause. I view it as a cause of the Ummah. I don't believe in this intersectionalism that people try to bring nowadays to the Muslims. Palestine, as long as it remains framed as a secular cause, will have tremendous flaws. The moment that that cause is reframed as the cause of the Ummah, I believe this is where we will be successful. How much have the secularists cared about Palestine in these last 3 years? How many bombs have they stopped? How much effort have these Western secular governments undertaken, the supposed architects of human rights, right? The supposed architects of the UN Charter? How much of a damn did they give about the life of a Muslim? And these are the people who are teaching you your morals and your values. These are the people who you, even though you may claim to be a leftist, anti-imperialist, that's still their narrative. Left anti-imperialism is a Western construct, and you have to be very careful because sometimes these things come coded in a language of justice, but they're feeding you toxins. They're feeding you morals that are incompatible with your deen. And if we're not careful in separating those toxins and in creating spiritual shields for our community, then in the future our kids will be very confused about what we actually stand for as Muslims. Well, Dad, I mean, this guy is Muslim, but so Muslims believe in LGBT? Try explaining that to your child in the future when a Muslim candidate is walking hand to hand with LGBTQ folk, right? Well, Dad, I mean, we're Muslim, so a Muslim can represent shaitan if shaitan is his constituent? No, even this political concept that we approach in the West of how Muslims should engage is colonized, right? And worldwide in the Muslim world, even the politics that we do is colonized. Oh no, I have to represent everybody. No, you have to represent, and I'm very clear cut about this, the truth. And the truth is unequivocal. If the truth stands straight, nothing can blow it. When it bends, it becomes feeble. We tend to bend our truth too often, too much. Zohran is a prime example because Zohran is actually a hyper-secular, liberal Muslim figure. Yet whether he dresses his wife in a burqa or not, people will think of him the same. Oh, he's a terrorist, right? So that should, every liberal Muslim right now should be thinking, what's the point of me trying to appease these Westerners? Even if I dress and look like them, they're still going to think I'm a terrorist. Even if I go and kiss their boot and lick their shoe, they're still going to think I'm an extremist and I'm inferior to them.
Exactly.
So then why not reclaim the izzah of your deen? Why not fully decolonize? Stop pursuing liberal agenda, conservative agenda, left-wing, right-wing agenda. Stop using the language of the colonizer.
Yes.
This is something Malcolm X taught us even. Rahmatullah alayh. He taught us don't use their language. You cannot defeat them with their weapons because they're giving you faulty weapons on purpose to keep you silenced. Why would they give you reasonable weapons to fight back?
Exactly.
They're never going to do that.
No way.
They want you to stay down, whether it's the left or the right. And Malcolm's words echo throughout these decades when he said, for example, right, that the right is like the wolf. It gnarls at you, it shows you its teeth. You can see it wants to devour you, right? The left is like the fox. It smiles at you first, right? But the intention that the left has is the same exact intention as the right. It's to devour you, just through different means, just through a different approach. So why ally yourself to causes that have no Allah in them? These are faulty causes. They have their own agendas, right? They have their own historical complexities. You inserting themselves in them is you abandoning the path that Muhammad ﷺ and the prophets before him, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon them all, set for you. This is what real mental... And who talks about decolonization the most? Muslim leftists. We need to decolonize, we need to decolonize, we need to decolonize. My dear brother and sister, you're not decolonized yourself. You're using the language of Che Guevara and Fidel Castro and so on and so forth, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
It's still Western language. Communism is a Western construct. We can't come up with it, right? Leftism is, and I'll give some historical context. In the French Revolution, people think it was a revolution against the king. It wasn't. It was a revolution against God. It was a revolution against the church, the Catholic Church, right? To neuter the power of the Catholic Church in political life. Now, as a Muslim, I don't care what happens to the Catholic Church necessarily, but the symbolism there is that they just want God out of public life.
Gotcha.
And they achieved it, right? The separation of church and state, quote unquote.
Right.
In the aftermath of a successful revolution against the church, one of the Jacobin leaders writes to Maximilien Robespierre, the leader of the left. By the way, this is where the whole concept of the right and the left comes from. After the French Revolution, the Jacobins, the radicals, were the left, the morally ambiguous people, and then the conservatives, the monarchists, were the right, right? So, and they would sit on the left side of the parliament and the right side of the parliament. This is where we get the concept of the left and the right.
Okay.
By the way, I personally believe there's symbolism in that, because Ahl al-Yameen in Islam are never upon truth, right?
Yeah.
And even on the Day of Judgment, where will the book of deeds be given to the sinners? Or those who are condemned to Jahannam?
You saw it.
The left,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So back to the point, right? One of the Jacobin leaders writes to Maximilien Robespierre, and he says, now that we have successfully removed the church and God from public life, what do we give people to worship? It goes back to this idea that people are always oriented to worshiping something. They always need a Kaaba, right? And Robespierre writes back and he says, the best form of God, of religion to give to a mass without God is the worship of their forefathers, right? This is how nationalism was created after the French Revolution. And French Revolution was all about nationalism, right? Then we see the concept of the nation states. Then out of that exact sperm comes what? Communism, socialism, Bolshevism, right?
Even subhanAllah, this is like hit on in the Quran a lot, like my forefathers practice this, so why is he wrong?
Subhanallah. Yeah. And Allah says, do not follow those upon earth, they will misguide you. Do not follow the masses.
So essentially nationalism is a very recycled,
all the time.
There's nothing new. There's really nothing new to it.
All the time. I mean, it's tribalism rebranded.
Right.
That's all it is. Just a larger tribe, right?
Yeah.
So any ism, by the way, Any
I
ism,
would say.
nationalism,
It's a
conservatism.
belief system. It's a belief
You're
system
creating a
bring about.
religion. You really are creating a religion. And you're creating a Kaaba, right? The Kaaba of nationalism is the state, the country. That's your God, right? The Kaaba of communism, socialism is what? Is the means of production, is the centralization of the economy. It's material good, material prosperity, right? Economic material prosperity, devoid of spirituality, right? And then you can mention 1,000 other isms that all have their own Kaaba, but the main Kaaba that everyone should orient to is the Kaaba. It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right?
Exactly.
That's the only form of deen, of religion, that gives you a way out, that decolonizes you. And I think it's very important to have that concept in mind when we think about decolonization.
SubhanAllah. I think like it's I don't know, there are like so many like prime examples of, you know, like within history essentially that we can like look back on. And again, it just like, you know, you pointed to this one interesting fact last podcast that we did, which is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala stated that everybody will have their day, right? Like everybody has their essentially their peak, and everybody will have their low, right? This is in regards to a people or to a tribe, whatever you may want to go and call it. And I believe at this time in history, we're at a low, but if we change our mindset, if we begin to orient ourselves in the right direction, right? If we begin to align ourselves with the haqq, like you were saying, the truth, being warriors for truth and justice, because as much as people love a belief system, as much as people want to go and fall to something and they want to go and follow something, as much as people desire that, and we really do, it's innate within our human nature.
Part of human nature.
Right? Follow mom, right? Look at all the ducklings.
Right.
So as much as that is innate to us, I think that human beings love a truthful individual and a just individual.
Of course.
And we see that embodied in the Rasul
Sallallahu
and
Alaihi Wasallam.
in fact, in majority of the prophets, would people have followed them had they had not been truthful individuals?
No.
So I think where we start with this idea of decolonization is we need to start reshaping our minds into believing ourselves.
Right.
We don't need to convince other people. Khalas. There's no reason to. We've already discussed this, right? There's no reason to put pressure on ourselves to mold into something that already doesn't accept us. No matter what we do, no matter how shiny our shoes might be, no matter how tight our tie might be, right? There's a little aspect. Oh, Abdul, Muhammad, you hear it all the time, right? And then you go to a social event with an individual who you might have thought is quite a trustworthy individual, right? And suddenly, what do we see end up happening? Jokes start flying around, and the truth ends up slipping, right? The true intentions end up slipping, just like how the fox, right, will ultimately end up slipping.
Right.
So why include yourself and, actually, why seclude yourself in an environment that already demonizes you? Why? That is the trick of the colonist.
Right.
That's how they get you. They want to make you hate yourself. They want to make you hate Islam. They want to make you hate the way of life. And brother, let me go and tell you something. Is drinking really not that hard?
No, it's not.
Yani, it tastes bad. It smells terrible. It's terrible for you. Your health, the amount of effects that it has, not just on your liver, but just your body as a whole. And people end up doing the most terrible of things when they are. So what possesses you to want to seek that out?
Right.
What possesses you to wish to go and seek these things out? It's not because, again, we're born with this desire for this. No, it's because we're taught it.
It's an inferiority complex.
It is an inferiority complex, And my dear brothers and sisters, we need to wake up from it. We need to release these shackles, because in all honesty, we have free will. Nobody's stopping you from being a better person. Nobody's actually forcing you to drink or to commit, to gamble, or to essentially dabble in what is right by today's societal standards. No one's forcing you. So why put yourself in a situation like that? So the moment that we can begin to understand that there's a mindset and a shift that must change and that must occur, that will then guide us into, inshallah Rabbil Alameen, what we're all hoping for, what we're all desiring, right? Which is an ummah united. All of us dislike the suffering that we see on a daily in Gaza. All of us dislike the reports about the Uyghurs that we're hearing. Understanding that everything is, of course, propaganda in one way or another, meant to go and inflict an emotional tug here and there. But the truth is still the truth, right? We all hate it. We all dislike it. We're all asking ourselves deep down inside, when are we going to be back on top? When are we going to help the other Muslim? When are we going to be back to a Khalifa? And we're never going to be there unless we change the mindset.
Right.
Because, and how does the mindset change? One step. Changing one thing in your life that the colonizer wants you to adopt. Akhi, if you are wearing basketball shorts, it's not that big of a deal. I used to wear basketball shorts, right? But after reading a lot of Sunnah, after reading about the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, I don't wear shorts as much. I'm changing, right? It's one thing at a time. It's one little wins.
Yeah.
Because again, it goes back to what you're saying. This brainwashed, it makes, people want to go make us feel so down. Just all it takes is one little win a day, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves the consistent Muslim.
Yes.
Consistently strive in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and do you really think that you're going to be let down?
Right.
I don't think so at all.
No, you're right. This actually, this reminds me of a quote. It says, I wanted to change the world. I set out to change the world. And I realized I needed to change my city first. So I set out to change my city. And I realized I needed to change my neighborhood first. So I set out to change my neighborhood. And I realized that I needed to change my family first. So I set out to change my family, and I realized I needed to change myself. And for a lot of us Muslims today, once you hear this, just a quick technical pause right there, take a brief time out and ask yourself, do some introspective reflection, meditate. What have we done to change ourselves for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And what is it really that the colonists and the oppressors don't want us to internalize? Because protesting in the street, as good and powerful as it is, they can mobilize the police and take you out, right? Raising flags, they can burn your flags. They can throw your leaders in prison. They can silence your shuyukh. But can they silence the truth in your heart? No. Can they take Allah away from your heart?
No.
They cannot. They cannot. I'm Albanian. I know, because they tried in my country. Albania was the first atheist state in the world in 1967. And religion was classified as illegal, punishable by death or 20 years in prison. They killed thousands of ulama from all religions, by the way, priests as well. They imprisoned intellectuals. They banned religious clothing. They banned beards.
Wow.
Right? You cannot read Quran. They shut down and destroyed masajid. Literally, there's videos of this. You can go and look them up. Right? They created an entire generation brainwashed into destroying the deen. Right? They demonize the religious scholar. You can see this in Soviet pamphlets too, by the way, when they're trying to secularize the Central Asian Muslims as well. Because Albanians borrowed it from the Soviets ultimately, you know? That Eastern colonization that I'm talking about.
Yeah, right.
They tried and they tried and they tried. And then go and look up the first Jummah khutbah in Albania in 1991. And look at the crowd of people that showed up. It's going to shock you. It's going to send chills down your spine. They tried so much. And this is an ayah that they will try to put out the flame of Allah, right? But Allah will perfect His flame.
Yes.
And out of all of those efforts, they miserably failed. Islam is rising now more than ever.
Yes.
There was a massive backlash. They threw a rope again on the neck of the dictator and they tore his statue down, right? And they flooded the masajid. And they're flooding the masajid. And even after that, there was a secular effort from the West now, because there was religious forces trying to reestablish themselves in Albania. So State Department directives came now to the Albanian government, the democratic government, supposedly, keep the Islamists down, raid them, imprison them, right? This is not even the communists. Now you can technically practice, right? And they tried again and again and again, and we're still here. I'm a product of that. I was raised, my grandparents did not know how to pray. My parents did not know how to pray. They do now. Alhamdulillah, I taught them, right? I was raised with stories of awliya by my grandparents. They didn't know how to pray, but they taught me the stories of these Islamic shuyukh and saints who kept it. That was all I needed, man. That light spark to keep the deen alive, so that something could come. And there's thousands of people like that. You can talk to them, right? All over the Muslim world, in Central Asia and Albania, even in Syria, you're seeing stories come out of how the Baathists and the Assadists were treating religious individuals. Now, keeping record of who prayed Fajr in the masjid, right? How many people prayed their salah on time? Almost like half of the population of Syria was in the records of the mukhabarat. The effort of Fir'aun, this global Fir'aunic system, to silence the deen, but we're still here.
Exactly.
Does that not say something? Are you going to surrender to those forces mentally? As a lot of Muslims, maybe they wear hijab and they have a beard, but mentally they've surrendered. Are we going to do that, or are we going to start changing ourselves? Are we going to start orienting ourselves towards the Kaaba? You may face the Kaaba in your prayer, but your heart is not towards it.
Yeah. Dang.
And until you direct your heart towards that Kaaba, no change is going to come. So we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to redirect us to that Kaaba.
I mean, by the way, do you want to end it there, or do you want to keep on going?
No, we can keep on going.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, subhanAllah, man, like, it's like this whole, you know, I look at the, dude, you know, it really does piss me off, the Arab glazers right now.
Okay, elaborate.
The current Arab population that are like they're very accepting of their leaders, you see. So you mentioned exactly the ones who are kind of like, hey, life is good,
right? So
let's not do anything about it, guys. Type of individuals who are, again, living just essentially a day by day. I think that those are the individuals that are really scary, because they actually prefer life this way, right? And when that normalcy gets shaken, they freak out and they cling to anything that will give them what? Just like how you've been emphasizing this entire episode, that material, right? Anything back to that normalcy. And who promises that normalcy, Reggie? At the end of the day, when all things are extremely, extremely bad, who's that person that's going to be there to provide you with all of that normalcy? Oh, you want Wi-Fi? I got you. You want a cold water? I got you. You want some food? You're hungry? I know, I got you. It's the Dajjal. It's literally the Dajjal. If you don't see how even the mindset of taking things chill, taking things easy, not worrying about it, not worrying about salah, not worrying about giving zakat, not worrying about helping the poor or the homeless, or helping just your Muslim brother or sister in general. whether it be on an exam or monetarily.
Right.
Right? Because it doesn't just stop there. You know, when we are stuck in this kind of this mindset, essentially, like, where do we have to go? Right? Only to the Dajjal. Because it's going to offer all these things.
This is this is the hadith, right? That he will come, and on one hand he's going to have Jannah, and on the other hand he's going to have Jahannam. Exactly. You pick Jannah and you're going to enter Jahannam, and you pick Jahannam, you're going to enter Jannah. This is a good parable to explain that. Exactly. That picking material comfort, the comfort of this dunya, that this Dajjalic system is offering you, is ultimately going to lead to your ruin, whereas choosing struggle will lead to your reward. And this is like a given rule for any society, any human being. I think that's a very powerful point to make, that the fact that the colonial project is a Dajjalic project.
100%.
It's a shaitanic project, right? It's a project, and we have
another
to
ism. It's another, literally,
right.
It's another ism.
Right, it really is. It really is. And we have to think that ultimately that's our sworn enemy. Shaitan is our sworn enemy. It's not people. No. You know, people always have the chance for redemption. It's Shaitan. He is your sworn enemy, and he is the one orchestrating these systems. He is the one, because what does he have? Time. He has a learning curve. He's been doing this for thousands of years.
Yes.
He's figured out the hooks and crannies of how to get to the human being. Unless you are close to the source that burns him, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? And I think that's a very, very powerful metaphor for what colonization really offers, right? That's the spiritual colonization, by the way. It offers ruin at the end of the day. Using the systems, the rhetoric, the language, the lexicon, the words, right? The ideas of the disbelievers will ultimately lead to your ruin. Return to the source. Return to change. Change gradually. That's what the colonizer hates the most. It's the change in your heart, because they cannot open your chest and look into your heart and think, let me take this part out. They can't do that. They can't kill an idea. They can't kill a belief. That's the strongest weapon a believer has. And that's what we have to return to.
I mean,
I don't know if we want to go beyond that, but...
Well, because it touches... I mean, subhanAllah, the changing of the hearts thing kind of touches onto the subjects that I want to bring up, about that whole Peter Thiel Antichrist thing. Yeah. Because that's actually what they want to do.
Right.
They don't want to just stop at changing your body parts, and they don't want to just stop at changing your mindset. Hatta. They want to change your soul, right? Imagine we still haven't... there is no measurement for a soul.
We don't know what a soul even is.
Right? We haven't captured a soul, right? We know that it exists. We feel it every single day. I mean, subhanAllah, dude, have you ever had like a near-death experience?
Of course, yeah.
You'll experience some type of out-of-body experience at that point, right?
Right.
So, just because it's something that is not quantifiable for them, but they want to. You see, they need to, because they cling to, again, these isms that services their rational thinking, right? But is the rational mind always necessarily the thing that's going to bring you to a higher level?
Not always.
Not always.
Not always. The mind is a tool. The mind is a tool. It's not an end, right?
Exactly.
Spiritual fortification in this time more than ever.
Yes.
Surah Al-Kahf is a very powerful tool in that arsenal, right? Every Jummah to recite Surah Al-Kahf. And it breaks down all of this, by the way, because sometimes you're in a society where you actually just kind of have to go in the cave, and you have to step away. There's not much you can do. There's social hysteria everywhere, mob mentality everywhere, and you have to retreat, right? So there's a lot of things that the Muslim in exile has to balance. And we have to keep all of these things in mind. We'll discuss a lot of these topics in the future. Inshallah.
Inshallah.
But for now, let's focus on decolonizing our minds. That's the first step. We are not there yet, and we have to constantly put more and more effort towards that goal.
Inshallah. And maybe we'll make like another episode where we discuss at least what we believe is like a proper strategy for going about decolonization. Right. Because again, we do want to stress that we don't want to become like the uncles who simply talk. We want to, with coffee, but we want to actually be the uncles, I guess, who
get up and do something.
We talk, and then we also have some form of like, action that can be taken, right? Either for yourself personally, I know obviously we always have things that we can better ourselves on, or for one's family, their community, again, their nation or the world. Inshallah.
Khair. Well, Jazakumullah khair for joining us in our segment of Ummah in Exile on decolonization, part 1 maybe. Maybe there will be a part 2 in the future on the strategies, as Abdurrahman mentioned.
Yes.
We leave you with this call to action, because I think every episode we want a call to action.
Yeah.
Implement small change. That's what the colonizer hates the most. It's the change of the heart. And until next episode, Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.